Hey everyone, welcome back to the English Podcast. Today, we're diving deep into some amazing stories. So, grab your coffee and let's get started.
Think about the last time, a major project just completely blew up in your face.
Well, we've all been there.
Right. And when you had to explain that total disaster to your boss, did you say the initial plans failed? Or did you say they fell through?
I bet you chose the latter.
Exactly. I'd put money on fell through. But, why? Why do we constantly reach for these small two-word phrases when perfectly good formal verbs exist?
Yeah, words like fail or collapse.
Right. So today we're doing a deep dive into this fascinating source called Essential Phrasal Verbs for Fluent Communication. And our mission for you today is simple. We aren't just going to read a dry list of vocabulary words, like some boring audio textbook.
Right, please no.
Yeah, no thank you. We are going to decode the actual secret engine of fluent English.
It really is a secret engine, too.
Yeah.
Because phrasal verbs, these tiny little combinations of a verb and a preposition, they actually do the heaviest psychological lifting in our everyday conversations.
Mm-hmm.
They carry this completely different emotional weight than their formal counterparts. And native speakers just rely on them instinctively to signal how they truly feel about a situation.
And as I was reading through the source material, I noticed a really distinct pattern that kind of perfectly explains this.
Oh, what kind of pattern?
Well, the 30 phrasal verbs highlighted in this text, they map flawlessly onto what I'd call the life cycle of a challenge.
Okay, I like that. The life cycle.
Yeah, because if you think about it, every massive undertaking you experience, it goes through the exact same phases. You launch a new idea, you hit that grueling execution phase, you inevitably smash into unexpected roadblocks.
Always.
Always. Then you enter pure survival mode, and then, hopefully anyway, you pivot and reach some kind of resolution.
That narrative arc is incredibly revealing, actually. Because the English language has naturally evolved to mirror that human experience of struggle and triumph.
Mm-hmm.
We don't just use these verbs to describe actions. We use them to describe our physical, our emotional relationship to a project as it unfolds.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because every big endeavor has to start somewhere, right? You have the initial spark and the setup phase.
Right, the beginning.
This is that moment you are initiating change in your life, or maybe in your organization. And a word the source highlights right away is bring about. Bring about.
Now, formally you could just say cause,
Yeah.
but saying, like, a new government wants to bring about changes in the educational system,
Yeah.
that feels totally different.
Completely different vibe.
Right.
Oh.
It implies a journey, almost like a shifting of massive gears.
I would actually take that a step further. I mean, bring about suggests this level of deliberate stewardship.
Stewardship. I like that.
Yeah, because when we talk about, say, technological advancements bringing about a revolution in communication, we aren't just saying one thing randomly triggered another.
Right. It's not an accident.
Exactly. We are saying someone actively guided that transformation into reality. But, before you can guide a change, you have to actually conjure the idea in the first place. Which brings us to come up with. Right, producing a solution. And let me throw an analogy at you here, because this is where the standard textbook approach usually fails learners.
Lay it on me.
So formal vocabulary words like invent or conceive, they're essentially the architectural blueprints of a house.
Okay.
They're precise, they're sterile, they look great on paper, but phrasal verbs, they are the actual hammers and nails you use to build the house. They get your hands dirty.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
So why do fluent speakers almost always prefer a gritty phrase like come up with instead of a clean formal word like invent?
Well, what's fascinating here is how much spatial psychology is basically baked into that choice.
Spatial psychology.
Yeah, think about the physical imagery of come up with. A word like invent sounds very solitary and honestly slightly arrogant. Like a lone genius locked away in a laboratory.
Yes, the mad scientist vibe.
Right. But come up with feels grounded. It feels collaborative. It instantly makes your speech sound less robotic because it implies this physical, laborious process of pulling an idea up from the depths of your mind and placing it onto the table in the shared space of a conversation.
Oh, wow.
It's an invitation. It invites the other person to look at the idea with you.
It pulls the idea into the room.
Exactly.
And once it's in the room, you have to transition from dreaming to logistics. You have to actually set up the reality of it.
Yeah, the logistics.
Maybe you're setting up a new corporate branch in the city center, or maybe it's just as mundane as getting a colleague to help you set up a projector for a 10 a.m. meeting.
Yeah.
You are arranging the physical pieces on the board.
And once that board is set, someone actually has to take on the responsibility.
Right.
Picture a company deciding to take on new staff to handle a seasonal rush, or maybe a junior employee taking on a really difficult project just to gain the experience.
Just jumping in the deep end.
Exactly. And taking on isn't merely accepting a task. The preposition on implies real weight. You're placing the burden onto your own shoulders.
Which drags us right into the second phase of our life cycle, the grind.
The grind, everyone's favorite phase.
Right. You've accepted the weight, and now you have to transition from those big, lofty ideas to actually executing the work and communicating with your team.
Yeah.
This is where we run into verbs like carry out. It's highly procedural, like a team of scientists carrying out a series of research experiments, or the police carrying out an investigation. It's that step-by-step march of reality.
It really is the daily march. But, in the middle of all that carrying out, you have to actually coordinate with other human beings.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. You have to get across your ideas, which the source defines as successfully communicating an intention. I mean, think about how notoriously difficult it is to get your true tone across in just a quick text message.
Okay, wait. I have to push back on the spatial metaphor slightly, or at least point out how bizarre it kind of is.
Oh, so?
These communication verbs sound incredibly strenuous, almost violently physical.
Oh.
Does saying we need to get an idea across imply that basic human communication is as difficult as, physically crossing a wide, treacherous canyon?
Honestly, yes, that is precisely the implication. And it perfectly illustrates that cognitive distance between two separate minds.
Huh.
You're standing on one side of a vast canyon with your brilliant strategy, and your team is standing completely in the dark on the other side.
Oh, right.
Communication isn't just a matter of, broadcasting a radio signal into the void. It's about ensuring the cargo actually survives the journey and makes it to the other side completely intact.
So that's why you might use visual aids during a presentation. You are building a sturdier bridge to get the message across.
Exactly. A sturdier bridge.
And as you guide people across that bridge, you constantly have to point out the hazards. You're literally directing their gaze. Like an editor pointing out several glaring errors in a draft report, or maybe a manager pointing out the hidden benefits of a new strategy. It's a very physical way of managing someone's attention.
It's a gentle but firm way of directing focus. Like, instead of aggressively saying, "You forgot to sign this document," kindly pointing it out really softens the blow.
It totally does.
And when there are still gaps in the team's understanding, we use the phrase fill in. If a colleague misses a crucial meeting, they don't usually ask you to inform them, they ask you to fill them in.
Because inform treats the brain like a hard drive, but fill in treats the person like a vessel that is just temporarily half empty.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
You are pouring the missing context into the empty spaces of their knowledge, just like, a student filling in the blanks on an exam paper.
And that spatial reasoning continues when something looks suspicious or just really complex. You don't merely observe it, you have to look into it.
Look into it, right.
Like management looking into a sudden wave of staff complaints, or city authorities looking into the root cause of a massive power outage. You are basically peering down into a dark hole to see what's hiding at the bottom.
But unfortunately, no matter how carefully you look into things, the honeymoon phase of the project always ends.
Always.
Reality hits hard. Which brings us to phase 3 of our life cycle, the bumps in the road.
Right, because inevitably the execution phase crumbles a bit and you run into problems.
Run into.
Yeah, this phrase beautifully captures the sudden, jarring nature of an obstacle. Sometimes it's literal, right? Like running into a former colleague at a coffee shop.
Sure.
But usually in this context, it's an abstract collision. You hit unexpected technical difficulties during a software update, or you leave the office at 5 p.m. knowing you will run into rush hour traffic.
You didn't plan for the collision, it just happened. And when you run into enough of these collisions, your grand plans start to fall through.
Ugh, the worst feeling.
The absolute worst. The source defines this as failing to happen as originally planned. And it literally hurts when you say it, like a family's summer vacation plans falling through due to unexpected financial issues.
Right.
Or a major business deal falling through at the absolute last minute because the primary investor just got cold feet.
And when you sense a project is on the verge of falling through, the natural human instinct is to delay the pain.
Oh, absolutely.
You try to put off the inevitable, pushing an urgent strategic decision off until next week, or putting off studying for a certification exam until midnight the night before.
Yeah.
You're just pushing the timeline further down the road, hoping the problem solves itself.
But eventually, if putting it off doesn't work, you just have to call off the whole endeavor. You cancel it.
Yep.
Like a championship match being called off because of torrential rain, or a risky hiking trip being called off due to a severe weather warning. Actually, let me ask you to clarify a crucial nuance here, because I think a lot of learners get stuck on this. What is the exact psychological difference between a plan falling through and being called off?
Okay, great question.
Like, if we use a bridge analogy, it's falling through the bridge, collapsing under its own structural weight, while calling it off is the mayor actively deciding to close the road.
Yes. If we connect this to the bigger picture, that distinction is exactly how native speakers wield these phrases to manage crisis communications.
Really?
Yeah. Falling through is a declaration of passive failure. You are telling your team that you didn't want the deal to die, but external circumstances, the finances, the disagreements caused the collapse.
It wasn't my fault it fell through.
Exactly. But calling off is a declaration of active cancellation. You, or someone with authority, made the deliberate, difficult choice to terminate the plan. Choosing the right phrasal verb here dictates whether you're framing yourself as a victim of circumstance or as a leader taking decisive action.
Wow, that nuance completely changes the tone of an email. But regardless of who is to blame, when things fall through or get called off, systems generally break down. The machinery of the project just stops functioning.
Yeah, it breaks down.
Like a commuter's car breaking down in the middle of a busy highway, or a factory machine breaking down due to an electrical fault.
And notice how the phrase also applies to intellectual systems. When a massive problem seems totally unsolvable, a good analyst will break down the budget into line items.
Right.
You are taking a monolithic threat and dismantling it into manageable, less terrifying pieces. Because if you don't dismantle the problem, you are thrust entirely into phase 4, survival mode.
And here's where it gets really interesting. If you look closely at the specific verbs the source groups together for this phase, phrases like get by, put up with, run out of, wear out, pass out, there's a profound, undeniable theme of deep physical depletion. These aren't just words about project management anymore. They map directly onto the draining of our human fuel, our mental energy, and our daily patience.
It's a brilliant observation, honestly. Formal English often intellectualizes stress. We use words like endure or tolerate or exhaust.
They sound so clinical.
Extremely clinical.
Yeah.
But these specific phrasal verbs, they capture the visceral physical reality of operating on empty. Take the phrase get by.
Okay.
You aren't thriving. You are barely scraping the bottom of the barrel. It's the feeling of trying to get by on a painfully low salary in an expensive city. Or a team desperately trying to get by with only one functioning laptop for a massive presentation.
You're surviving on the absolute bare minimum.
Exactly.
And a huge part of that survival is having to put up with awful conditions. You're hoisting a heavy burden and just holding it there, putting up with a miserable 2-hour commute every single morning, or putting up with an incredibly toxic, high-stress environment at work simply because you need the paycheck.
And you can only hoist that burden for so long before you run out of resources entirely. The vessel is just empty. You're running out of printer ink right before a deadline, or running out of time on the final question of a math exam, or even running out of fuel halfway across a desolate stretch of highway.
And when the external resources run dry, you start spending your internal resources, which means you eventually wear out.
Wear out.
You use something until the friction literally destroys it. A pair of cheap running shoes wearing out after a few months of pounding the pavement, or a set of car tires wearing out after thousands of miles.
It's friction.
It is. And it happens to our bodies and minds, too. Working 14-hour days without a break won't just tire you, it will fundamentally wear you out. The friction degrades you.
Which brings us to the absolute limit of human endurance. To pass out.
Yikes.
Losing consciousness entirely. An elite athlete passing out from sheer dehydration after a marathon, or someone passing out because the room is just suffocatingly hot.
Yeah.
The system forces a hard reboot because the depletion is total.
But, you can't live in survival mode forever.
Thank goodness.
Right. The human spirit naturally rebels against depletion. Eventually, you catch your breath, you look at the wreckage, and you transition into phase 5, the pivot.
The pivot.
This is where adaptation and aggressive problem-solving finally take over.
And you start the pivot by ruthlessly assessing what is dragging you down, and you do away with it. You abolish the unnecessary weight.
Right.
Like a modern company doing away with an archaic paper filing system that slows everyone down. Or a society passing laws to do away with single-use plastics to save the oceans.
I really love how do away with feels different from abolish. Because abolish sounds like a king sitting on a throne issuing some royal decree.
Very formal.
Yeah, but do away with feels like rolling up your sleeves, grabbing a trash bag, and violently cleaning out your garage.
It's very hands-on.
And if you can't completely toss something in the trash, you at least try to cut down on it. You reduce the intake.
Exactly the way a doctor might sternly advise a patient to cut down on refined sugars to avoid a health crisis. Or an office manager begging staff to cut down on daily paper usage. It's a deliberate, tactical retreat from excess.
And while you're trimming the fat, you have to reinforce the load-bearing walls. You need to back up the things that actually matter.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about this with data, right?
Right.
Always backing up your crucial files on a secondary hard drive. But it's even more important with people. Asking a senior colleague, hey, will you back me up when I pitch this radical idea to the executive board? You're asking them to stand structurally behind you so you don't fall over.
You're building a new foundation. And sometimes part of building that foundation means having to make up for the errors you committed during the chaos of survival mode.
Yeah.
You're compensating for a glaring deficiency.
So what does this all mean? When I look at the phrase make up for, it feels like looking at the ultimate balancing scales of human interaction.
Oh, totally.
Like a guilty partner buying an extravagant bouquet of flowers to make up for being 3 hours late to an anniversary dinner.
Classic.
Or a young green employee working brutal overtime hours to make up for their total lack of industry experience. Life is essentially this constant precarious state of making up for our shortcomings to keep the scales even.
That is a highly perceptive way to view it. It is the language of restoring equilibrium to a damaged system. And to finalize that equilibrium, you have to put in the effort to work out the core issue. You wrestle with the problem until it yields.
Like an engineer staring at a whiteboard trying to work out a complex mathematical equation for hours, or two hostile lawyers sitting in a conference room trying to work out the final agonizing details of a merger contract.
And consider how perfectly workout bridges the abstract and the physical. We use it for contracts and math, but we also use it to describe going to the gym and lifting weights.
Oh, true. Working out.
Right. It reveals how our brains process problem solving. Whether you're actively wrestling with abstract numbers on a page or literally wrestling with heavy iron bars on a bench press, you are applying intense, sustained pressure until you force a positive result.
Which finally brings us out of the trenches and into the final stage of our journey. Phase 6. The resolution.
The end of the road.
The dust settles, the work is done, and we look at the final outcomes. We get to see how it all turned out.
The specific, final reality of the situation, the high-risk marketing event, turned out to be wildly more successful than anyone dared to hope. Or that immense sense of relief when you realize everything turned out perfectly fine in the end, despite all your midnight panic attacks.
On the flip side, sometimes you pull the cake out of the oven, and it absolutely did not turn out the way the recipe promised.
So disappointing.
I love the phrase turnout because it operates exactly like the dramatic reveal at the end of a movie. The silver cloche is lifted off the plate, and the dish is either a breathtaking culinary masterpiece or it is a burnt, smoking disaster.
Right.
But either way, the suspense is over. It's out in the open.
And once the reality is out in the open, the power dynamics shift. Someone new has to take over. A newly promoted director taking over the management position at the start of the fiscal year. Or a massive, ruthless corporation taking over a scrappy little tech startup. The old guard steps down, and the baton is passed to the next runner.
And as you move forward in this new reality, you inevitably come across new things. Finding things entirely by chance, or presenting a specific aura to the world. Browsing a dusty library aisle and coming across a brilliant, forgotten book.
Nice.
Or finding a box in the attic and coming across an old photograph of your grandparents.
It also describes the accidental impression you leave on others. If you step into a new leadership role, you want to ensure you come across as a deeply confident and capable professional, rather than, frantic and overwhelmed.
And with these new impressions come new opportunities. And when an opportunity knocks, you shouldn't just impulsively react. You have to think over your choices.
Think it over.
Like a recruiter offers you a lucrative but really demanding job, and you tell them you need the weekend to think it over.
This raises an important question for you, the listener, regarding how you approach vocabulary and communication as a whole. True fluency isn't about memorizing rote lists of formal definitions. It is about understanding the subtle, rhythmic flow of these combinations. The difference between thinking about a job offer and thinking it over is profound.
How so?
Well, thinking is just brain activity. But thinking it over implies you are mentally walking around the opportunity. You're examining it from every possible angle and weighing the long-term consequences.
It is the difference between reading the sterile architectural blueprint and actually knowing how to swing the hammer.
Exactly.
And once you've made your decision, you have to close the chapter. As a project fully wraps up, you eventually have to say goodbye to the people who helped you survive it. You see off your friends.
Going to a crowded airport gate to see your friends off before they move across the country. Standing on a cold train platform to see your brother off as he heads to college. The act of seeing someone off provides vital emotional closure to the life cycle.
But it isn't a tragic closure. It's a hopeful one, because the absolute final verb in our life cycle, the one that points us toward tomorrow, is look forward to, feeling a genuine sense of excitement for a future event.
An entire team looking forward to an upcoming annual retreat. A researcher eagerly looking forward to the results of a long-term clinical survey. It takes all the exhaustion of the previous phases and transforms it into momentum for the next challenge.
The next spark. It really is an incredible circular journey. Just by examining these 30 tiny phrases, we mapped out the entire human experience of tackling a massive challenge.
We really did.
From the initial spark of coming up with a wild idea, through the grueling grind of getting your intentions across, smashing into roadblocks where your best plans fall through, surviving the sheer physical depletion of being worn out, pivoting to work out a new solution, and finally, looking forward to whatever the future holds.
It serves as a powerful reminder of how much raw, visceral action and emotion are packed tightly into these unassuming 2- and 3-word combinations. They are the true heartbeat of the language.
They absolutely are. And that leaves us with a final assignment for you. Over the next 24 hours, I want you to actively think over your own daily conversations.
Pay attention to them.
Yeah. Notice how often you rely on these highly spatial, deeply physical phrases without even realizing you're doing it. And ask yourself this. If you consciously swapped out a stiff formal verb for a vibrant phrasal verb in your very next email, could it completely change your level of approachability and the entire vibe of the interaction?
It probably would.
Try leaving the shiny blueprints on the desk and pick up the hammer. See what you can build. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.